got this.
DeAndre, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hold
Give
up.
me a second.
Let me adjust the volume a little bit here.
Hey, DeAndre,
All right, there we go.
you have the live stream titled as Carl Boynton.
I've changed it. It's going to take a while before it actually updates and reflects it. Using this new software, it starts streaming before it lets me change the titles of it. So I've already updated the titles, and it's going to be reflected.
Software, that's always fun.
I got to figure out how to get it to change the titles and names of it before it happens the next time. Okay. Right, here we go. I haven't started recording yet, but the live stream is going on. So those people who are members of the Facebook page will be able to see the stuff that goes on before we get started with the show. We've got about 1 minute until I start recording. Trying to get everything set up here.
Yeah. Good. By the way, I enjoyed your growing in Christ.
Oh, thank you for viewing that. I'm trying to get my host Jay to commit to it more. He gets discouraged a lot very quickly, but that's why we call it Growing in Christ with Jay, because Jay is what we would probably consider a babe in Christ. Some of us who've been doing much longer than he has been, and he gets discouraged pretty quickly. So trying to get him back around to it and have him join us again on tomorrow to start trying to get this off. We want to do 52 of those episodes this year.
Oh, wow.
One a week, for every Sunday.
Yeah, I enjoy, especially the use of vocation right at the beginning. That many people wouldn't have started there. It's a word we don't hear a lot anymore. So
I tried. I always tell people when it's strange. My greatest study companion to my Bible is my dictionary. It's my biggest study companion that I have, and I believe in using that as much as I can to try to make sure that everything is squared away. If I don't know a word, I go look at the dictionary. If I can't find it in my dictionary, which I've got, the World Book Dictionary is huge. I've got two volumes of it, A through K and L through Z. So if the word's not in there, which is rare, I go find it on the internet and do a little bit of research on what it means. I never did play too much into wordplay for a long period of time until I started really diving into writing and literature a lot more and understanding the meaning of words a lot more than what they just, how we just speak them off. One of the things that my English teacher from college, Professor Winters, I absolutely despised her class because she made me read these books 3 times over and try to figure out the different diction and connotation of these words. And I'm like, I'm never going to use this. And then about 2 years afterwards, I started using it a whole lot more. But with that, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to start recording in about 3 seconds, and we'll get this on the way. Okay, welcome to the Story of America, and good evening, everyone. Uh, we always share in America's rich history, but none more so perhaps than our next guest tonight. Tonight, we'll be interviewing the Democrat candidate for the 4th District of Mississippi of Congress, David Sellers. It is people such as these that leave the largest impression in the story that we all live here as Americans. Politics is so often seen as a neutral force where we can all hope to have somebody represent us on the grand stage to give us and secure us more advantageous benefits. Over the course of the next hour or so, we are going to ask the tough questions that most debate formats will not allow or present the candidate the necessary time to answer. We will press on issues ranging from economics to social issues and anywhere in between. So without further ado, allow me to introduce tonight's guest, Mr. David Sellers. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run for Congress, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Sure, absolutely. I'm been born and raised South Mississippian, except for a brief period in graduate school. And I've been a pastor for most of my adult life in the Hattiesburg area. I'm on Hattiesburg's Behavioral Health Board. I also do some work with Pine Grove. And so with a smattering of all sorts of other jobs around. One of the reasons that I decided to get into politics is most of my career has been on the ground level, working with people right where they are, people that are dealing with difficulties, everything from depression to anxiety to addiction to all sorts of grief work. And I noticed somewhere along the lines, right at the beginning of the shutdown with COVID, that a lot of the issues that I deal with on the ground level, they're systemic issues that have to do with policy issues, with the way that politics has corroded. However, and knew that there had to be something more, something that, and with the way that the rhetoric was getting so much, I knew that it suited my gifts to step in and that it was time. It's time for a leader who can listen, who can discern, who can bring many groups together. And after looking around, finally stood back, if not, who would but me? And so I took that step forward to jump in. And so that's why I'm running. So hopefully we can have someone that serves the 4th that represents everyone in the 4th and not just a few.
Love that sentiment. So, Rhett, as usual, I'm going to let you go ahead and start off with the questions. The way this format is typically goes, Rhett has questions that are more specifically designed towards you. I have questions that are more engineered towards general questions about politics and the larger scope of things. And we may deviate from our individual questions as topics become hot issues and if we want to gain a little bit more information. So with that, Rhett, go ahead and ask your first question.
Hey, can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hear you great.
Hello, Reverend Sellers. How are you doing tonight?
Good.
All right. So to start us off, I'm just going to ask you to explain a little bit about your background and experience. Go a little bit more in depth. I know you just answered that a little bit, but anyway.
Sure. One is I'm working in a behavioral health and addiction services place, Pine Grove, for over a decade. I've also been, senior pastor. I've been associate pastor at different churches. Probably the longest time is here at Parkway Heights in Hattiesburg. And I've served various capacities before that. In my previous life, I did a lot of management work, did a lot of tech work in that capacity as well.
It's good to see somebody still has faith trying to get into Capitol Hill. I think that kind of kills faith for a lot of people. Any other questions you got, Rhett, before I jump in?
I've got a few introductory type questions. The second one would be, please explain briefly your primary political leanings, where you land as far as left, right goes.
Oh, wow. little bit, I mean, uh, uh, wow. Well, actuality, I'm left on some things, right on some things, the middle with others. I know that's a little vague, but I think
No, it's
everyone.
not. It's
So,
that's a fine answer. I mean,
I
there's not
would
a whole lot of real moderates left today, but I think most Americans fall into that category.
I would agree because strangely enough, Rhett and I, we both did a political compass test. What was that, in December? And we both,
Back in
I mean,
November.
yeah, November, yeah, somewhere around there. And we both did one, and we're I think Rhett is more authoritarian right. I'm
No, I'm more
libertarian
libertarian.
libertarian right. I'm
You're
libertarian
closer to the
right, but
middle than I
I'm
am,
close.
but
Yeah, like for my compass test, right? Rhett's he's far more right than I am, but my compass test has me
you got it
like
backwards, man. Listen, I can tell you, I
like
remember
one.
exactly what they look like. Okay.
I
Both
took a
of us were around
screenshot
the
of it.
same spot on the left right axis, which was very close to the middle, just slightly right. And you were further up, closer to the middle as far as
Yeah.
authoritarian libertarian goes. And I was further,
So
I was about halfway down.
yeah, he was about halfway down. I'm about halfway up. And so there are issues where I feel as though most Americans can go tit for tat on particular issues. I know one of the issues that a lot of our viewers, a lot of Mississippians are going to be wondering about. That's going to be my first question, and that's on economics. And that is that the economy is often the number one issue for voters, as you know. So, what economic system do you subscribe to, and why do you feel that it is best suited for America?
oh, wow. For economic system, I really believe in a mixed system. We can't, I think oversubscribing to one leads to really the main faults of that. We need a mixed system that brings in to see what's best for America right now, which may in the future change a little bit. And so I don't know if that helps a little or.
If you explain just a little bit more on a mixed system, I understand what you mean by bringing in the best aspects of some systems, trying to leave behind the worst aspects of them. But what systems, more specifically, do you believe compounded together would do best for America?
Sure, sure. So for one is looking at the ways, for example, a lot of people talk about a free market system. However, the market has never been free for everyone. And not only that, but if it's under-regulated, then you have a lot of things that go rampant, including things that we're dealing with right now, from poison lakes, streams, water supply systems. And so there needs to be some sort of regulation with that. At the same time, you're looking at right now, Congress is looking at whether they should even be allowed to trade stocks, which is a no-brainer when we see that obviously they're profiting off of some insider trading. So either the insider trading is so loose that, well, very rarely does anyone get convicted on that. So there has to be some sort of regulation. However, over-regulation just is bad for the market as well. So that's what
Understand more. You have any questions, more introductory or economic questions, Rhett?
No, that's it for the introductory questions, but
sure.
I don't really have my questions set up in any specific, they're not grouped together. They're just like yours are. So economic questions though, let's see. Well, we could go with this one. You kind of just explained this a little bit though, the proper amount of governmental participation in the economy, but you basically answered that. So you can go ahead, DeAndre.
Okay, then this is also onwards to the economy. The cost of inflation has reared its ugly head, and while the overt effects of inflation are going to be here with us for a while, it's the short-term effects right now. The raise in prices. I went to the store the other day to get some ground beef to make some spaghetti. 1 pound of frozen meat at Family Dollar, $6. And there's the people outside of Mississippi, they're like, well, $6 is a fair price. But for 1 pound of meat in South Mississippi, never did I ever think I would see $6 for a pound of frozen beef, and most of it chuck, which is the parts that most people don't want in their meat in the first place. So, what solutions do you bring to the table that will help deal with inflation in the short term? Because I think the short term is really what people need right now. They need a little bit of relief in their pockets.
Short term is tough because with everything that's going on right now, you're seeing a multiple kind of bottleneck. One of the things that's hurting right now is we haven't really applied the antitrust clause as adequately. So we've allowed corporations to get so large that they control so much. That's one aspect. The other aspect is inflation right now. Everyone's talking about the rate of goods going up, but they rarely look or hold businesses accountable. I mean, for example, oil and gas prices have a record profits, Amazon record profits, even Chipotle has record profits, shipping even record profits, and yet they're the ones that keep going up. Nobody's holding them to account to corporate greed right now. And so there's an opportunity right there to say, wait a minute, CEOs are getting paid additionally. Now I don't want to say what somebody should make. However, when it's to the detriment of everybody else, at some point, you can't, it seems like the corporate holder is saying, look over here, look over here, look over here. And the American people can only buy that so long.
Absolutely. On a follow-up question to that would be, yesterday we had one of your competitors on the show, Republican candidate Carl Boyanton, and his particular issue with inflation and the rising in cost was the rising cost of fuel and energy. Do you believe that energy has anything to do with the rising cost of inflation?
That energy has the rise. Well, you look at right now, if oil and gas prices are skyrocketing record profits, well, there's a slight thing as well. However, if you look at renewable energy right now and then the rate that it's saving corporations, more and more you're seeing automakers suddenly go to solar because they recognize the writing on the wall. Here in Hattiesburg, our own plant stopped production so that they could switch to solar. So we're seeing ways that energy can save. The problem is in between. And so I think perhaps it's more to our elected officials to put pressure where pressure should be. Instead of the people, and you can also see what has happened since the COVID shutdown happened. We have moved to a goods society and away from a service society. And so with the bottleneck of all the goods, then you see the prices range, but you should give it a little bit of time. We're now seeing other cities are outside of the Omicron wave. I think I don't want to make any predictions about that for Mississippi. But I do think we're finally seeing some letting up of this, and you're going to see some things relax. So everybody wants the quick fix, though, with inflation.
Go ahead, Rick.
All right. So I'm going to ask you to highlight the main issues that you see with Representative Palazzo and why you decided to run this year.
Correct. The main issues against Palazzo?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Besides not being able to represent all of Mississippi and typically representing his corporate interests and not being able to listen to the people. If anyone's ever tried to call him, write into him, dialogue, are there secret vetted town hall meetings that he has on Facebook? Oh man, it's yeah. This is one of the things that I've thought about is how do I let elected officials then have the concerns of their constituents in mind once they are elected. It's one of my gifts is in listening. Not only that, but Palazzo is right now involved in an ethics scandal, and so in which the House Ethics Committee unanimously voted that he has taken, yeah, and used campaign funds and even, yeah, well, into his own pocket. So, and not to speak of me, but I think that's also why the sharks smell blood in the water, and there's like 7 or 8 Republican competitors right now as well.
Yeah. Well, all three of our previous guests have mentioned that ethics scandal involving Palazzo. And back 2020, he was completely unopposed. So, of course, he got 100% of the
It
vote.
wasn't completely unopposed. I just didn't make it to the ballot.
Well, he was unopposed on the ballot. So, anyway, I think that Palazzo's been mostly a disappointment. And I agree with everything you said about him. I think it's time that we put somebody else in there because we never see him.
Exactly. I think that was the primary issue when I ran in 2020. I didn't get very far running on the independent ticket. So, but a huge hurdle to climb trying to go on the independent ticket. But as I told Rhett, the primary issue that I had with Palazzo was his presence. If it wasn't for the fact that I was trying to run against the guy in 2020, I would never even know who he was. I wouldn't know what he looked like. You never see the guy. And our Republican candidate we had yesterday, one of his issues was Palazzo refuses to accept debate challenges. You can't get on stage with him. You can't hear him. And then he's got the funding of all these slush funds and lobbyists in the state of Mississippi. So he doesn't really have to. And that's my issue with my biggest issue, the ethics scandals and all that. You go down the ladder in Congress and you probably get rid of 85% of congresspersons were on those types of ethics scandals. But if you're going to represent the people should at least be able to see you and know what the heck you look like.
Absolutely. There's a book I read last year looking at ways to fix our electoral process. And one of the top ones at the very top is if you're on the ballot, it's a forced debate. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, they should definitely have to have at least one debate, no matter what the office is, as long as it's federal. I mean, that's reasonable to have as a rule.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that even on the state level, because I think a big problem with trying to get people out to vote on the state level, which I think is more important than the federal level, is a lot of people don't really know who they're going to be voting for. They follow the certain cliques, they follow the certain party, but they don't know the views of the individual that they wind up voting for. And the turnout for state and local elections is much smaller than it is for the turnout for federal elections. And I think there needs to be some spotlight on that. And I think the local media has to take some responsibility for that because they don't platform these things nearly enough.
They never, I mean, that's really kind of the purpose of what we're trying to do here is fill a hole left by the local media because they don't, the last time I went to, that I'm aware of, there was any kind of debate or forum was 2014. And the only candidate who didn't show up to that was Palazzo, of course. As far as these interviews go, of course, he hasn't responded. I don't think that he will, but we are going to platform all of the candidates that do respond. And we have one more coming up. And then, I mean, whoever wants to come back on will. But yeah, the local media has definitely left a hole that needs to be filled.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to move from economy and I want to talk about taxes because I think the first thing that Americans are paying attention to on payday is how much money Uncle Sam is pulling out of our paychecks. there was a time when I was making $9.10 an hour, and I would work 40, 45, sometimes 50 hours a week, get a nice paycheck, and I'm looking at my check, and I've got $350 deducted out in taxes. Then I'll raise up my money, start making 13, $14 an hour. And I'm looking at that check and the money that's coming out of that check, and I haven't changed anything on dependent clauses. The money that's coming out of that check is a little bit less. And so I think right now, particularly people that are in the lower income brackets are more concerned with tax hikes. So my question on this is, are you for or against tax increases? If you are against tax increases, then are you in favor of tax decreases? And explain.
I would say, as far as, well, first, let me say this. No, I don't think anyone really, I agree with you. And I would love to live in a world with it's a zero tax rate. Love to. However, I think the more important system is a tax system should simply be fair for all. One of the things every time I go to do my own and taxes is the denomination I'm part of, pastors are considered self-employed. So we hit that self-employment tax that's just ouch. And then I look around, and percentage wise, I've paid more percentages than the past 10 presidents combined, so so for us, we do need to look at taxes in a better way that are more equitable for everyone.
I've had to file that self-employment tax, and you're right. It is painful. It is very painful. And then when I started investing in Roth IRAs and paying taxes forward, the amount of money that you wind up having to write off, saving every little receipt, it gets a little hectic at the end of the year when you have to go back and look at all of those different receipts. And they got apps now that kind of consolidate that, make it a little bit easier. But I've had to do that, and it's one of those things. So you say you want to see a fair tax. Is that going to be a tax across the board for all persons, or do you want to have different percentages for different brackets?
I would say a progressive tax for different brackets.
Okay. Any questions on that, Rhett, or you want to move on?
And just thinking in that line, it should be even with the deductions that we get, there should be no way that you take it below a certain percentage.
What would that minimum percentage be?
Yeah, that I think we need to work out with some professionals, but I haven't. That's a good question. Thank you for asking. However, to know, presidents who only pay barely 5 or 6%, that's definitely, not equitable.
You mean like while they're president?
Anytime.
Yeah. Well, now the reason I asked that is because if they're president and they were paying taxes while they're president, then that would mean that they were paying their own paycheck, or at least a percentage of it, which is kind of strange. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, a lot of presidents do become wealthy after leaving office. And I mean, this progressive income tax is a reasonable idea to me, but I think of it in terms as there should be a maximum. I don't know about minimum. I suppose we can have one of those too, but anyway, so this is going to be a question I have. It relates, I guess, kind of to the last one, but do you think we should cut federal spending? And if so, which programs or offices must be cut or have their budgets reduced?
Definitely a cut. In fact, some need it more than others. I think it'd be looking at projections down the road is my most concern, because so many leaders get in office and they're looking at immediate concerns right now. I think it's the way that you look at cities that have done well. They've had mayors that have been able to project 10, 15, 20 years down the road even further. It's one of our failures of our leaders right now, is to project further out. Think of investing into the future of America. And those programs may need a little bit more. And so we're the ones that right now, need to start trimming that back.
Yeah, I think that, if you look at the old world, Europe, for example, all the cathedrals and stuff over there, you look at the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, those buildings took hundreds of years to build. The pyramids, possibly thousands, and we can't even think 50 years in advance. Yeah, it seems like a modern problem, but it's certainly something that needs to be fixed.
Here's a question in relation with that. We talk an awful lot about taxes when it comes to spending issues and things like that. Milton Friedman, some years ago, came up with the idea of a reverse income tax. Now, I don't know all the specifics behind the reverse income tax, but from my understanding, the idea of reverse income tax would be, rather than taking a certain percentage of money out throughout the course of the year and then having to file to get an income tax, instead, the government would give that money back to the American people, as if, say for instance, if you were investing and you got dividends off of your investment. It's similar to that, where you've been overtaxed. And so now when the government starts to facilitate and budget all those things, they give that money back to the Americans because they've taken more than what was necessary. Would you be behind something similar to some type of reverse income tax?
Maybe that sounds I would need to look to investigate into that a little further.
I'll have to do a little bit more research into it too. I was just reading some of Milton Friedman's works, really not much of his work. I was reading a book by Dr. Walter Williams, and he mentioned some of the studies of Milton Friedman in there, and one of them was reverse income tax. So I wanted to speak on that. One of the big issues that, also when it comes to taxes are the erroneous amount of taxes that we have on the books. Are there any taxes on the books specifically right now that you believe are on the books and are unjustly represented in Congress, or have no real meaning, no real need to be there, that might need to be removed from the tax system?
Not off the top of my head, but let's look. I can think about all of the erroneous laws that we have, from the no chewing gum on Thursday between 2 and 3, type of things that were never taken off. There's got to be a couple on there that are just, lingering in the background. It's like,
The one that comes to mind for me is the death tax. I mean, that seems completely unjust.
Oh yeah.
But it's relatively easy for federal agencies to put new regulations in place, but the protocol for having them taken off the books when they're no longer relevant is almost non-existent.
But typically with it's really capital gains, not a death tax. And to even be taxed at that amount, you've got to be receiving a hell of a lot of I've known several friends who've had very wealthy parents, but none of them hit any of that. And
I don't really know any of the details. I just know the name, the death tax. And if people are taxed as a result of a family member's death, that's wrong. But if that's not happening, then, you
Well,
know,
it's happening with those who are like, we're talking like several million and even above that. So it's another one of those things that's been marketed well as a death tax. But your average, person who's, especially throughout Mississippi, who's, they may be leaving thousands or even hundreds of thousands. They're not paying that.
Wouldn't you say that that is still an unfair rate? I worked in the life insurance sector for a good couple of years, and one of the issues is if you don't have a beneficiary selected, the government, and then you've had some people like Senator Elizabeth Warren that wanted to raise that to almost 50%. The government comes in and they take pretty much 35 to 42% right now of money that could go to the estate or could go to the next of kin. And a lot of the issues comes down to some of these people that didn't have a will or didn't have a beneficiary set up, and they wind up losing a whole lot of money that their family could have had.
Yeah, so I'm with you on rewriting a lot of that work. Unfortunately, I've had to since with friends of even my children who have had parents or grandparents that have died early, and some had a will, some did not, and we have laws set up around that are based upon, well, archaic systems, if you would. And so rewriting from the top to the bottom would be a good start. Think of all the laws that we have in place now that were created for horse and buggy. And yet, except for some old order Baptists that I know that live in Summerall, we don't have many of those in Mississippi.
And that's true. You have to go over to New Orleans and see a couple of horses been carrying wagons around. Go ahead, Rhett.
okay. You currently have one opponent in the Democratic primaries, Johnny Dupree. He's previously run for governor. In fact, I actually know him. My mother, when he was first elected mayor of Hattiesburg, was his public relations coordinator. I have contacted him, no response as of yet. But could you just highlight the main differences that you know of between him and yourself, if you know of any?
This is a, I having sat down with him only a couple of times, I haven't really, heard from his camp or even from him, what are going to be some of what his main platform is. So as far as policy issues, I know what mine are and what I stand by mine. So this whole time my vision is looking at taking Palazzo out of that seat. And I think that should be my focus, not so much on my opponent in the primary.
Okay. That's fair enough. I respect that.
Very respectable. My next question is, my next series of questions are all going to be directed towards healthcare, because it's one of the biggest talking points on Capitol Hill right now. And so I'll just go right off the book and start. Would you repeal or keep the Affordable Care Act if the choice came down to you?
Came down to me, I would keep it, though that's my druthers, if you would be to tweak it. I mean, it was a tweak upon our current healthcare system, and it did not go far enough.
It did not go far enough. Explained, because from my point of view, many of the issues in the Affordable Care Act, having sold it for a number of years, has been that it overregulated the market and crushed smaller businesses and allowed for monopolies to form.
if you'll look closely, especially if you look, a lot of the states that they regulated who could come in and who couldn't. And so they seem to be part of the problem in how it was laid out. I mean, look at even Mississippi, the way that we did not fully accept the Affordable Care Act. I mean, still 300,000 Mississippians that right now could benefit from health care that's physical and mental health. And and then they do everything they can so that businesses can't compete outside of Mississippi, only a limited few. If we open it up and allowed other insurance companies to compete with that, I bet it would bring the price down even further. I mean, for example, since the Affordable Care Act came out, premiums have actually been going down for about 2% since 2018. And the rate that they're going, it could be going down even faster.
If I may, I would say that the reason why premiums started going down in 2018 has been a direct result of President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which in that clause removed the individual mandate from the Affordable Care Act. And the primary thing about the Affordable Care Act, the reason why, in my opinion, prices rose as fast as they did, was not only did they price out competitors, but when they put that individual mandate in there, it forced people to purchase coverage that they may or may not have wanted. And a lot of people didn't understand what the fine or the penalty, what we called in the marketplace, the shared responsibility fine or shared responsibility penalty. People didn't understand what that fee was. So a lot of them opted into purchasing coverage in order to avoid having to pay an unknown amount at the end of the year. So by removing that mandate and allowing people to opt out of purchasing insurance without being fined if they don't want to, I think that allowed some wiggle room for companies to start to compete and lower the prices a little bit more. Because prior to that, 2013, when the Affordable Care Act first opened up, the prices were raising by over 60% in several states, and in some states were raising by over 150%.
So I'll have to find the article. There's an article that came out during that same time that was arguing that by ending the mandate is what slowed down the rate of those premiums. In fact, they would have been going down faster if more people were involved in that, which is part of the idea in the first place. You know, for those who were a little more healthier, a little less coming into the doctor, it pays out for those who are coming into the doctor a little bit more. So,
would you say that that's fair for say for instance somebody like myself? Well, before I became chronically ill, somebody like myself, when I was healthy, goes to the doctor maybe once, and I would before I got sick, I didn't even go to the doctor once a year. I probably went to the doctor maybe once or twice every 2 or 3 years, and I didn't need coverage for that because most of the time, if I wanted to go to the doctor, it was usually for something minuscule. I would go to the Coastal Family Health Clinic, which I still go to them today, even with my insurance. I go to Coastal Family Health because I like my doctor. They're reasonably priced, and I don't have to worry about not being able to get seen if I go to some of these larger doctors. And I got to say it, in the waiting room, I got COVID for the second time, and I was at Memorial and stuffed in a small COVID waiting room with people who are infected, and sitting there for four or 5 hours before anybody even seen me. And I would say, to me, it wouldn't be fair to me for somebody that isn't going to the doctor very often to have to pay a higher price for somebody that has to go to the doctor very often. I think if you want to use a service and have quality service, you should be willing to pay for what you're willing to use. If I don't want to use my services but once or twice a year, I should be able to purchase a plan like that. And one of the issues that I had with the Affordable Care Act was it prohibited you from being able to purchase those types of plans, catastrophic plans, and other low cost plans weren't considered essential health benefits, and so they weren't qualifiable plans. So even if you purchased a catastrophic plan for only $150 a month, they didn't consider it to be a health plan. So you were still fined at the end of the year, even though you did technically have coverage.
I think that's one of the tweaks that I mentioned earlier. Ooh, you disappeared. That's one of the tweaks I mentioned earlier to it. I think there are a couple of components to speak to that. One is we do need to streamline. We need to streamline wait times. We need to streamline access, apartments. But for me, fair is everyone having access to healthcare.
Yeah, Andre.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I don't think he's hearing us.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I'll pick this up. DeAndre, you back?
Unfortunately, I missed all of that because my headset was dying, so I had to get it charged. But I can play it back in my ear. I'm watching the stream on my phone, so I can see everything you're saying because of that. It's subtitled.
Love subtitles.
So go ahead. Your next question, Rhett.
All right. If you were elected to the House of Representatives, would you back a new Speaker of the House or stick with Nancy Pelosi?
I lean. I lean towards new. She, my I don't know. Spidey sense is she won't. She likely won't run again. So
Hopefully not.
I can.
I think she made an announcement that she was planning on doing so.
They always do. I
would
mean, she's
say-
almost 80 years old, so it's
Yeah,
time.
it's time. I would put in a plug for Hakeem Jeffries. Might be an interesting one in that spot.
Yeah, I don't even know who that is.
I'm not a fan of Hakeem Jeffries. I don't think he knows what he's talking about half the time. If there's anybody on the Democrat side that I think would make a decent Speaker of the House right now in Congress, oh geez, there aren't very many that I see. I mean, anything's better than Pelosi right now, except if you went for one of those AOC types. I think they would kill the Democrat Party flat out.
I'm really not familiar with that many Democrats in Congress right now.
I mean, I know the names, but the name of the one that I'm thinking, I can't remember his name. I think he's the majority whip. I can't remember his name though. But at the same time, if I remember correctly, his age puts him in the same bracket with Pelosi, and that's a problem to me. On both sides, Republican and Democrat, it's the age of these candidates.
Would that be Clyburn?
Yeah, I think no. Is it Clyburn? No, Clyburn's the black fella. No, not Clyburn. There was another guy. I think he's the number 3. I want to say he's the number 3. He's a white fella, but I can't remember his name. And he came out. He was speaking. He was much more rational to me than Nancy Pelosi was. But I can't recall what his name was. This has been a while. He might not be in Congress anymore. It's been a while. It's been like 2-3 years. So he might have retired from Congress since then. But he would be the guy that I would go for. But at the same time, as I said, his age is in the same age bracket as those people that I think need to get out of Congress in the first place.
Mhm.
Here's another one on healthcare. What should government's role in healthcare be, if any role at all?
Access. Uh, Government's role should be, helping so that everybody has access to healthcare. I mean, it's for me, it goes to a question, if we are actually our brother's keeper, then then that's, yeah, it starts there, providing access. It's another way to invest in the future of our country. I think if nothing else, the Affordable Care Act, one thing that it did would finally link up mental health with physical health. I mean, what a novel idea, right? If somebody's suffering from extreme depression or anxiety or PTSD, they're going to be affected physically, but they were not allowed that for years. And it finally said, nope, you've got to combine that. And so I think we're now looking at that next step of finally wrestling with that. It should also provide access for vision, for dental, for hearing, so as well.
That was a very big problem that I had with the Affordable Care Act was you were forced to pay for certain services that you wouldn't necessarily use, but those services didn't apply to you. For instance, in every health plan that you purchased through the Affordable Care Act, it was guaranteed to have 100% women's coverage. It was guaranteed to have 100% children's coverage, including vision and dental for children. But when it came down to adults getting that same type of coverage, or men particularly, there was no such mandate. And you actually wind up incurring more cost because you had to go then purchase a separate dental plan, and the marketplace does not offer a vision plan, so you have to go outside of the marketplace to get a vision plan. So those are some of the issues that I saw when I was working with the Affordable Care Act, because minor things like that. And I'm in favor of repealing it altogether, but if it was to be kept, there are several revisions that I would make that I think would make it better. I think you and I could find some spaces of agreement on things that can be removed from it or changed to more benefit people who might be consumers of it.
Yeah, I'll let you know another one that I'm seeing lately as well. For instance, with the Affordable Care Act, if a business, once it got to a certain, it has to provide an opportunity for your insurance, but not your spouse. So what businesses are doing nowadays is they're putting pressure that if you don't let them know that your spouse does not have insurance, then they will drop you even. They are putting additional penalties. I mean, I've even heard of some companies even firing people for not coming forward and sharing if your spouse can get insurance at their work. And that's just
that
wrong.
comes that brings up a very brief question when now with this COVID stuff about spousal insurance. At my previous job, one of them, due to COVID, one of my managers was put on the ropes about getting a vaccine or risk paying an extra $300 a month on insurance prices, which seems to be completely antithetical to the idea of the Democrat Party being the party of healthcare. You're telling people that you want them to have healthcare, and he had healthcare through his spouse's job, and then you come out and tell them that if you don't go do this, we're going to penalize you for your own personal choices. Do you agree with any type of restrictions or penalties been placed on a person for choosing to do or go without certain services?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you for that first part about, however, as I'm curious, was that coming from the Democratic Party for that?
Well, it was a
You
Biden administration mandate where he tried to force it through OSHA as well, but the Supreme Court struck down the OSHA thing, said it was unconstitutional. But his entire thing was, if you didn't get the mandated vaccine, then you would face an increase in your insurance costs, which I think is just absurd. You're trying to get people to get insured, and then you're telling them that if you don't get the vaccine, which we could all have a conversation about the vaccine, but we're trying to stay platformed, and we don't want to get into those things too much. But if you're trying to get people to have insurance and be covered, it seems to me to be completely reverse. To tell people, no, you just because you won't get the service that we want you to get, we're not going to allow you to have insurance at the rate that you were having it before.
I think for that instance, it's then becomes an economic issue, almost like you said. If I don't need those services, why should I pay for them? Well, if you have somebody that doesn't get vaccinated, the chances of them actually needing far more services than somebody that is vaccinated goes significantly up. And so,
But wouldn't that go against the law of the Affordable Care Act? One of the key laws that's within the Affordable Care Act is that you cannot be denied coverage, and that your coverage cannot change due to suddenly coming down for critical illness. So how is this, if multiple attempts by the Trump administration to strike down the Affordable Care Act were deemed unconstitutional, how is it then constitutional to force insurance companies to raise prices on consumers that do not wish to be vaccinated?
sure. And so, even though I think to your earlier part, it was that test for the mandate for the unvaccinated. Was that correct? Then was it instead of insurance?
It was at first test, but then they switched it over to insurance costs. And then they tried to go with OSHA violations to force all companies to do so. And then the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional for the federal government to force private companies to force their employees to be vaccinated. But it was okay for the federal government to force federal employees to be vaccinated or risk losing their jobs. And so then it came down to raising insurance costs for those. And so that's what I'm looking at here. Is
Yeah,
if it's unconstitutional to strike down the Affordable Care Act, surely it should be unconstitutional to raise rates because somebody refuses to elect a certain service. I think that goes against the Affordable Care Act.
Mhm. So it's it's in that kind of, at least for me, that strange. You don't want to. I would think it would be more the insurance or the business themselves that's wanting those, because you get in that gray area. For example, a lot of businesses have a health plan. If you're hitting the gym or doing these type of criteria, then your insurance drops. Well, is that bad for those who decide not to go exercise? And you could then say, no, but this needs to be the insurance for everybody. So it's as long as it's not an exorbitant hike. I'm not sure. They're not trying to, get people out of a job, but I know that ultimately insurance companies are worried more about their profit margin more than any one political party.
Hey, Rhett, you have any questions on that?
No, I don't know. I don't have any questions on healthcare.
All right, we'll go on to your next question. I have one final question on healthcare, but we'll go back to that question after Rhett asks his.
Okay. President Biden has been escalating his war cries against Russia. Should the United States be obligated to defend Ukraine against Russia? And if so, is it really worth the recent talk of the nuclear option potentially endangering the entire planet?
Um, let me first first say that I don't think I do not want war. So I'm not something, one of the politicians out here saying, we immediately need to go to war. I do think, but there are other ways to being tough besides going to war. However, we should maintain, America's usual puffed up chest in this case. All political actions need to be taken. I don't think we should just, kind of usher, if that's what Russia wants to do, just let them have it. I do think, there's a lot of ifs right now that we don't know about, a lot of variables that are up in the air. But I'm not going to be one of those war hawks that immediately says, let's strike down. I think we need to try as many options as we can before there's a default of a leader kind of stepping in past their boundary lines.
All right.
During our show yesterday, there was a bulletin that came around that said that 72 hours was the period of time that the Pentagon had given people within Ukraine that were Americans or American allies to get out, because they believed that within 72 hours, Russia will have invaded Kyiv. And what belays the issue, and I think the thing that really ticks off so many Americans, is the manner in which they are trying to get people to withdraw from the Ukraine. It seems to be almost a repeat of Biden's withdrawal in Afghanistan, which Americans did not enjoy at all.
Yeah. It's an interesting issue to watch too, because it's getting all sorts of views on Democrat, Republican, all over the place. I don't think it's a space that if something does happen, then we need some immediate sanctions in place, some immediate response. Doesn't have to begin with war, though.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree that I don't want to go to war, and I don't think me personally. I'm a pragmatist. I believe that America should take care of the home base before we decide to take care of other places. And I believe that we've given them more than enough money, more than enough resources to protect and defend themselves. So let them do their own thing. At the same time, I don't believe that we would have even come to this position if certain policies that the Biden administration had removed, which had kept Russia at bay for a while. For instance, the Nord Stream pipeline that Russia uses, and that gives Russia so much more leverage when it comes to anybody in the European nations from challenging them on them invading into Ukraine or Crimea or any other place. And that's because they get 60 to 80% of their fuel from Russia. Most of Russia supplying most of their energy. So I don't think that they would try to bite the hand that feeds them, because Biden, at the same time as he allowed them to start pumping oil again, he closes down ours. And so now we're also dependent on that energy as well. And the European nations are no longer purchasing energy directly from us because we're not producing nearly as much anymore. So that, I think that causes a bit of conflict of interest and causes a bit of tension between some of the European nations, because I don't see them as want to get involved so long as they're energy dependent on Russia. If America had remained energy independent and continued to be the number one supplier of energy in the world, as we were a few years ago, then I don't think Russia would ever have had the money to do this. Because a few years ago, I think Russia's economy was less than 7 trillion, and it was dropping fast because they weren't able to compete with the lower prices of oil once America became the #1 sponsor of energy. Now that we're out of the picture and they're #1 again, now they have enough funds to do this. I don't think they would have done so if we kept those policies in place.
Yeah, well, first, I agree with a lot. Just one little thing I heard right at the beginning, that the pipeline, I think it was mostly built by 2021. But you're right. Germany is dependent upon Russian gas, and that's caused a sticky widget.
I went to my question. My final question on healthcare is: would you support incentivizing free market competition as an answer to the growing cost of healthcare?
Could you elaborate?
For example, say that I wanted to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, or I wanted to keep the Affordable Care Act. Doesn't matter which one. In this hypothetical, I would put certain price ceilings and price caps in place, and then I would say, well, I'll give you, let's pull out of the air Blue Cross Blue Shield and Cigna. We got these two competing with one another, and I'll say to these two companies, I'll give to you a 2.5% tax break if you're able to bring the quality of coverage of all of your plans down to a certain level for a certain price. And then you allow those companies to compete with one another to see which one can get their prices down lower while keeping the quality at a certain level, and give them the incentive to do that by saying, well, if you can meet these parameters, I'll give you a tax break at the end of the year.
Sure.
All right, Rhett, on you.
You believe that the Silicon Valley oligarchs should retain such immense power over our free speech, or should these social media platforms be regulated like public utilities, since most of our public discourse now occurs on these platforms?
Wow. I think that's the big discussion sometime back with the was it Section 230 reform?
Yes.
You know, and so as to view them as a utility, though, I'm not willing to go there yet. However, you saw the debacle that happened with net neutrality. I mean, all of these companies were able to basically buy off, including the current person that's there right now, lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, all the ones who voted against net neutrality were the ones who had donations. I mean, 70,000 and above into their campaign, and it's you're seeing some of the results with slowing down of pipelines across internet access right now. In fact, just this week, some of the top tech magazines came out with new ways that you can tell to see if your service is slowing down. Even though you're paying for the full internet, yeah, they're tweaking and adjusting according to, yeah, it's.
Well, that's why I'm asking, like, should they be regulated like public utilities so that companies aren't able to do things like that? I mean, the reason that they are able to control so much of our public discourse is because they're private companies, and they can't be, they can ban and deplatform whoever they choose to. But and net neutrality also, that applies as well. If they were regulated like public utilities, then we would have net neutrality, but we would also have complete freedom of speech, like we do at least in public or anywhere else.
Right. And that's where I'd slightly verge off. I would say not regulated like a utility, but definitely needs more regulation.
What about simply removing the immunity that these companies get under Section 230? I think that would open them up for a lot more culpability and responsibility for some of their actions.
First, we need to rewrite Section 230. So instead of repeal.
Okay. All right. So my next couple of questions are going to be all on social issues, including welfare. And starting off with welfare, should we expand or reduce welfare?
Expand. So it's especially in regards, we're seeing it right. We're seeing that right now with the shutdown more than any other. So we need to, if you would, to take care of the least. Now, does that speak to the number one thing that usually gets brought up for those who are kind of taking advantage of the system, which, and yes, but we need to find better ways of doing that. Instead of the politicized ways and also extremely demeaning and shaming ways that politicians use it. And so we need to find something that kind of
define what expanding welfare looks like to you, because I'm for abolishing welfare altogether, but if I were to expand welfare, there are certain issues and policies that I would put in place that I would use to supplant some of the other issues that are going on with welfare. So what does expansion of welfare look like to you? What policies do you think are most important if you are to expand welfare?
Sure. I would think one goes right along with one of my policies on education is universal pre-K for childcare subsidies, or right along with that. We saw a huge advantage that the child tax credit made during the shutdown, and to a lot of families that I heard from that said because they were either waiting tables or doing something because of a service economy, that now we're on a goods economy, they could not pay rent without that. And so.
All right, Rhett, on you.
Okay. Here we go. We're going to shift to the border with this one. Explain your stance concerning the crisis at our southern border. Should we continue to allow people freely into our country, or should we begin taking steps to control the flow of undocumented immigrants?
I think at the heart of this is an issue that every time the studies are done on this, there seems to be one thing that both sides never take advantage of. One side demonizes the immigrant, the other side, is always then said we're just letting free flowing immigrants constantly, and that's really not the issue. One of the bipartisan reports that comes down every single time is to provide more immigration judges and lawyers across the board so that people can move in and through that system a lot more rapidly. A lot of times when some immigrants also get advantage to come into the country and work, for example, our farm worker programs. However, when you look at the Midwest, they're asking for those same protections for people who work in the dairy industry. They've been doing that for over 10 years now. We haven't given them anything. If some of those with kind of the farm visas could come in, help with the dairy, and then come out. Not only that, but the huge number of immigrants that come over here, well over 60% go back home. You also have the problem of some of the ones that we're seeing right now are not necessarily from Mexico, but Central America, in which we've done so much to destabilize.
Recently, some of the ones that came over were from Russia. So I definitely, I support immigration personally, but specifically what I'm talking about is what's going on right now, because they're pretty much just letting anybody in and flying them wherever. And that should make anybody a little afraid.
That is something that really ticks me off, because my grandfather-in-law is Honduran. He was deported in 2008, and we've done all of the paperwork of the USCIS to Tegucigalpa, and we've been doing that for since 2008, and he's still in Honduras in Tegucigalpa. So I agree with getting better lawyers, better judges, and all of just streamline the system. But those are people that are trying to come here legally. And what we find out is that we have more than 2 million legal immigrants that come into every year. The problem that we're facing right now is with these illegal aliens. And the issues that arise from that is, how is it that we can justify this as fair to the people who are trying to do it legally, that are in these waiting lines for 10 years, sometimes longer than that, if a caravan south of the border holding shirts and cell phones that says Biden let me in, and they just come straight across the border and goes, and they're shipping them off in airplanes and flying them into the inner cities and other areas. I don't think that's fair to many of these people that have been trying to do it the right way. And those are the people that we want, because they bring the urge and desire to be American, and they bring with them skills, and also we can vet those people, and we can know who they are. With these illegal aliens, we have no idea who they are, or if they like us, if they want to do us harm. We don't know that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, this one may seem, I have to take a deep breath with this one as well, because my wife is an immigrant. And so has a brutal immigration story of having to escape from Vietnam, because her family waited years after the mass exodus came in the mid-70s over here. The problem along the way is, with the code that we have, any misstep suddenly means somebody that's trying to do it legally is now illegal. And to use that language, to me, is one, it's demeaning across the board. And so, as well as, I've got friends right now to the left of me that are furious with Biden for containing to deport. I mean, just huge industries with that. But a system that, you're right, it takes years. And I could recount how various of our family members were legalized system at various points of the way, because one dot didn't cross, one checkpoint here, one thing here. And along that process, suddenly now they're termed this term or that term.
You run out of money before you can get anything done.
Yes. And the statistics that we have for communities that do have immigrants, they assimilate into our American system a lot quicker than people realize. Crime rate goes down. I mean, all sorts of statistics that are extremely positive for immigrant communities.
But those are among legal immigrants. The people who are coming in that are coming in illegally, which are the problem. I don't think anybody has a problem with the people that are doing it legally and are, here on voucher systems and here on asylum claims or things of that nature. It's these people that come in illegally and they aren't assimilating into our society. They're doing whatever they want to, and the crime is rampant. And we have no real way of being able to come up with statistical data on that, because we can't track them. I mean, we can track them as far as FBI complaints, but they don't participate in census data. So we don't know how many are here. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know where they have gone, because we don't have the abilities to track them efficiently. And there are areas on the southern border that don't have places where you can put structures like walls or barricades and things of that nature, such as the Rio Grande Valley. But in those areas, we have, or the media is spreading falsities about certain issues. They're talking about, they're whipping Haitians with horse reins, which what wasn't the case. There were split reins. I mean, down here in the South, everybody in the South knows what split reins are. We know how to ride a horse. You know what you use those for, and we know that they aren't long enough to whip somebody from the back of the horse. But the the issues that that uh, that really get faced here are the illegal immigrants. They are harmful to legal immigrant communities because they come in, they move in right to those areas, and a lot of the times these legal immigrants are targeting uh, legal immigrants and minority communities, and the devastation happens when from these people, and it's not a good thing, especially now that we have this fentanyl problem crossing the border. Where I think there were some numbers that came out just a couple of days ago that said that they have now seized enough fentanyl at the border to kill the entire population of the United States,
Yeah.
and that's troubling.
Which
Which
is
it
which
is
is
the highest
amazing because
in
they seize that much from the ports 10 times over, not the borders. Uh,
Can you say that again, please?
Sure. They've seized 10 times that amount from ports, not from borders. The borders and the fentanyl is much less than immigrants legal. It's so part of this comes from working at a treatment center. We get real friendly with a lot of the DEA and some of that, and they tell us all the time, it's yes, they're catching stuff at the border because they've got measures in place to catch people. So they're catching more and more through the borders, but the ports is where the good stuff is coming through. And we're getting more and more through the ports than any time that we got through the borders. Not only that, but I just have to circle back to the way that we process the system is how can we do it in a faster way, and a way that does justice to us and to them. One of the things that used to happen, oh great, was it the great, I'm going blank. It was during the Reagan administration, just before he allowed that huge group of immigrants to fast track the system. There was a process. So if you had somebody working for you as a company, did not have a lot of their work things in order, they could get a social security card, be part of the system, not only then a driver's license. So then they're also paying for driver's insurance along the way, so that they're contributing to our economy and then heading back to theirs once they get the, contributing back to it. So it's a it's a process, and I see what you mean, where you may have some coming through, but we've got so many that are spreading this rampant that we've got hundreds of thousands coming through, and it doesn't
we
seem
do
to be.
actually. We have record numbers. It's 1.7 million tons in the last 12 months, and they're higher than ever. It's all-time highs.
And I remember one of the heads of ICE had used numbers similar to that. Of the ones that we catch at the border, there's about 2.5 times that we don't catch. So the number that we were able to seize has been over 1 million. Then that leaves us anywhere between 1.5 to 3 million that have actually crossed the border, and we haven't been able to contain them. And that's a big issue, because it goes on to my next question on immigration, which is part of my social issues, is if we're going to be I know we all love to say that we're a nation of immigrants, which is perfectly fine, but do we need to, as Americans, start thinking seriously about a limit to the amount of legal immigration that we have for population size? Because there's going to come a time and period where we're going to look at America and we're going to look at China, and we're going to see China's got 2.5 million people. America right now has about 340 million. So how many more immigrants can we reasonably sustain before resources become an issue?
Well, as I process your question, just so that I can clarify, I'm not advocating for a free and open border at all. I'm just trying to come up with some solutions so that we can, move beyond more so than just illegal and illegal. In fact, the faster they're processed, the more that we know whether to process back or keep here or whatever. The other part is you're mentioning about the number of people that are coming in. Current population growth across the U.S. is slowing. And so we've got to look at immigration more than just as, and we can't look at immigration as a way to grow the numbers either. So, but I think we've done things enough to slow the processing down, the bottlenecking that anyway, it's tends to be good for the economy. I mean, you look at the ways that it is revitalized. There's why does his name slip me now? There's a guy who's got a national organization now looking at all the process of the just for the past 8 years, looking at immigration concerns and what happens within communities that take that on. And every single one, there's economic growth within immigrant communities. Look at the Gulf Coast with the Vietnamese, the shrimping industry. You can go up north to Detroit right now with some of the Muslim communities that came in from the Middle East. And so you're seeing revitalization.
I absolutely agree about immigrant communities having strong economic gains, and this has been the case since immigrants have come here. But you mentioned earlier about roughly 60% of legal immigrants wind up returning back to their homeland, and that's usually largely because they fail to assimilate to this type of culture. Particularly say back when we used to do most of the processing off on Easter Island and things like that.
Easter Island?
Not Easter Island. What am I thinking? What am I thinking? We used to
Staten Island. No, not
yes.
Staten Island.
Ellis.
It's Ellis Island.
Ellis. Yes, there I am. Easter. No, but when the Italians, they used to come in, and most of them wind up going back to Italy because they found a hard time assimilating. And the ones that did wind up staying here, their profit numbers skyrocketed in comparison to the average American working in the same industry. And it's the same thing with the Japanese and the Jewish people. We see their numbers for economics go skyrocketed through the roof. But particularly the Japanese, right? Especially how quickly they were able to rise after 1945, after they had been placed in internment camps and had pretty much all of their property seized during the war. But they were able to rebound very quickly, and they're one of the highest paid ethnic groups in America today. Same with the Jews. They're able to gain substantial gains. So I absolutely agree that immigrant communities do have that potential to have that yield. But it's these legal markets, I think they undercut the market for many of these groups, because if you have, we already have a minimum wage, which I think minimum wage is harming the average American worker. But if you have a minimum wage and then you have an illegal immigrant that is coming into the country and they're willing to work for less than minimum wage, then you wind up pricing somebody out of a job, because now they're easily able to go pay somebody who's willing to work 16, 20 hours a day, not just pulling out my behind, but they're willing to work a significant amount of hours without benefits, that an American who wants to work only 8 hours and receive benefits and make the minimum wage of $7.25, now you price that person out of a job because this person who's undocumented is willing to do it for cheaper. So how do we come up with solutions for those issues that causes economic turmoil in communities that we always say that they're not looking for a job, but the fact of the matter is that they've been priced out of the marketplace due to competition with illegals.
Yeah. I think you're, I mean, of course, one is to get them processed, take away some of the fear with that, so that all laws apply across the board. Look at a couple of years ago when the chicken plants were raided across Mississippi. You had a vast number that left, but they're also doing jobs that are you don't see a lot of Mississippians applying for.
That is true.
And by the way, I just to let you know, I did cheat. So I looked up the person that I was trying to remember, Ali Noorani. He has a book out called Crossing Borders, a reconciliation of a nation of immigrants. Amazing stories, but also looking at policies, things that we get wrong, things we get right, and where to kind of level the playing field, if you would, so that we can take the way that immigration has been politicized and put it in a way that's sustainable to America. So I forget the organization that he's caught up with now, but he had some. He's done a couple of TED Talks as well.
Well, go ahead, Rhett. I'm going to find something here, and then I'll ask a question once I find it. But go ahead, Rhett.
Okay. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so we covered that. Explain your, I think we touched on this just a little bit earlier, but explain your stance on Biden's botched exit from Afghanistan. And did he make the right decision? As far as I think most people agree that we didn't need to be there anymore, or should he have considered other options, alternative methods of exiting, considered other options for withdrawing the troops?
Oh, yeah. To break that down and realistic, I supported the withdrawal. I wish it had been carried out better. And I can make all sorts of my rationalization of how I think he rationalized it to do it so quickly, but I would be pulling things out of the air, to be honest, and just guessing at it. It could have been communicated better. It could have been things behind the scenes could have been done a little more. I mean, we've got military might know how to pull off an operation, and so the way it was processed, just we saw it. I don't the way it was handled, definitely do not agree, but could have been handled much better. But I do, it was far beyond time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, like I said, most Americans probably think, at this point, it is the longest conflict that we've been involved in. It passed up Vietnam years ago. But it was a foreign policy nightmare. And the video footage, it looked terrible. And so it definitely was. I think that it was just, personally, I believe it was incompetence, but it could have been miscommunication. It could have been whatever else, but either way, it could have been done better. I agree.
And I will do a shameless plug, since it's part of my one of my policies, is that I think our longest war has been our war on drugs. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Domestic war, yeah.
Rhett definitely agrees on that point. I'm indifferent, but Rhett has a story to tell in that particular situation that I do not. So Rhett's perspective on that issue is completely different than my perspective on that issue, because it's not something that I've had to deal with. But I can say that I agree on some aspects of it, because the absorbent amount of money that has gone into this, and no solutions have been made. And as I've been sitting here, I've been reading the book by Walter Williams, and right now, as I'm reading into it and getting ready to do a show for tomorrow, that's going to talk about a lot of the issues in in that book. But one of the big key things that I've seen is that from Walter Williams' perspective, and this book is called on Race and Economics, how much can what does it say? How much can be blamed on discrimination? But just taking that into a general aspect is in the preface to his book, he writes that many of these issues with discrimination and stuff of that nature, we try to price out and create all of these different policies to put all of this money here and all this money there to try to lessen the burdens of discrimination. Well, according to Walter Williams, who is a renowned economist, he says that if the issues were truly from discrimination, and the money that we have been able to spend has not created a solution, then perhaps the solution or the actual issue was never discrimination to begin with, but was something else. And so that's where I'm following along with this war on crime or war on drugs, is because a lot of the money is going to the wrong places. You know, we've been talking a lot more about mental health and things like that, and reason why people get on drugs in the first place. So I'm behind it on that issue, but I still have my reservations that keep me from fully supporting some of the new notions. Mm-hmm. But my question, it goes back to the border. And I don't often ask this question because we usually run out of time before I get there. But since Rhett brought it up, according to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it says that one of the Congress's key responsibilities is to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. When you have all of these caravans coming through the southern border, numbering in tens of thousands of people coming in at one particular time, rushing the border, is it not Congress's responsibility to suppress that invasion?
If it's an actual invasion, yeah, but I have not seen any footage of wholehearted them saying, here's a caravan that's coming through our borders straight through. If we streamline the system, the problems go down. We want to eliminate the problems because yeah, there's always going to be something, but we do need to approach it to streamline it. What we've been doing is, hasn't been working.
And allow me to follow up with this foreign policy question. Sure. If in fact the issue with illegal immigration is the economy, is not a better solution than reforming our immigration system? If not a better solution to that, would it be preferable to establish some form of trade or some, I'm not saying to give them financial aid, but some form of trade or some form of business practice with these nations that are trying to get into our country? Like, you have people from El Salvador, Honduras, and they're coming over here because they believe that they have much better job opportunities, and because it's much more dangerous in Honduras and El Salvador with a lot of these crime bosses that live there. But do you think it would lessen their urge to come here if we opened up facilities over there and caused some business, some trade that could reasonably find them a job where they could make a reasonable living in their own country? Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. If we help the nations develop to where they have some stability, for example, about 10 years back here in Hattiesburg was a wonderful family that had done, they were in the country long enough to, basically raise money to then head back and start a business there. That they wanted their country to flourish. They were glad and appreciative of every opportunity they had over here. So it wasn't necessarily that they didn't see they wanted to help theirs. At the time, they were pressured with gangs and everything else, and couldn't. And after several years, then that neighborhood started to stabilize enough. They went back as soon as possible. So I think if we do help the nations develop, especially if we help to create some of their problems, especially some of those problems created by the war on drugs, then
yeah, that's you can talk about trying to open up free trade with these countries, but as long as the war on drugs is going on, those countries are going to be, especially Mexico, going to be ruled by crime syndicates. That's just the way that it works. I mean, Mexico is owned by the most powerful drug cartels, which are responsible for well over 90% of the drugs in this country that are illegal, that are street drugs. And if you're talking about taking that industry completely out from under them and regulating that market instead of allowing it to be a black market, then the problem is almost solves itself. And the demand is never going to go away, ever. It doesn't happen. But making things illegal does not reduce the demand at all. So I think the only solution to the border crisis and to the war on drugs is to end the war on drugs.
Okay. My next big social issues question is, your party has been very adamant on where they stand when it comes to the authorities in this country. So should we defund the police, or if not defund them, would you support reallocating the funding to other purposes within the police department?
Ooh, I would. I'd not defund, not defund. I think we need to look at practical measures that help both the police and the communities that they serve. One of those is universal body cameras. The other one is looking at systems that they're now a part of that's really almost, and I don't, any word I use may seem like a bad word. I was going to use nuisance, but not really a nuisance, but it burdens them with things that they could be better suited towards their job, which they were trained to be. For example, many of the larger cities already have separate entities, most of them private companies that they use for traffic accidents. New Orleans does this, started several years back, so that police are not burdened down with every single bump and fender thing. They're having to fill out a little report. How many times are our police in this area in the Gulf Coast having to do that when they could be in the community? I think when we took police and made them in centralized locations, the studies have shown as soon as you took them out of those communities didn't know the police. They didn't feel safe or had a relationship with them. Also, creating ways to sustain their job. Another could be pairing officers with social workers whenever there's domestic disputes. Some agencies are even looking into liability insurance. I'm not saying that's the way to go. I am saying we need to try several things so that we can support them in ways that they can do the job that they felt proud to do when they first joined the force. Because I've dealt with some who have dealt with mental issues from serving faithfully. I mean, very beloved police officers. And then we've also dealt with those who were not. And I'll leave it at that there.
I've got a good friend who's a pastor in Hattiesburg, Reverend Michael Jordan, and he deals a lot with the youth that's in the detention centers and juvenile. And one of the biggest issues that we see in the community as a whole is the lack of fathers, the lack of after school curriculum that a lot of these young people have, and they go out and they get in trouble. Would you be in support of, I don't know, maybe on a state level, trying to encourage these locales to have the police be more active in community events, like say for instance a police fundraiser where they are out in the community, playing sports or playing football or doing something with the youth in the community to try to build that relationship with the police and build that relationship within the community to try to get everybody more involved in the community. And that would give the youth something that they could ascribe to after school. And that would give the police the opportunity to see the people that they are going to be protecting.
Absolutely. You were spot on with that. Community relations are key. Key to build trust, key to build safety. I mean, one of the top things that keeps coming up with police that sometimes respond aggressively at first, well, they're not haven't built any trust or safety as well. And so it's a mutuality. And when those two work together, it's a beautiful thing. For example, I have an uncle who was on the New Orleans Police Department. And as soon as I learned to drive, he said, come on down. I know you're going to come to New Orleans, and you're going to take your buddies here. Come here. And so I came, he got in the squad car. He took me around to certain places. He took me to one spot on a bridge and he said, you see there? Don't go there. And I said, well, why? And he said, we don't. And I said, yes, sir. And so, however, he passed away decades ago. Here it is, in 2021, that same community that I went to just recently, unfortunately for a death of a relative. And I ran into somebody that knew my uncle. And he was young on the force then. And I asked him about that same community. And he goes, you know what we started doing? We started edging into that community little by little by little. And now it's nowhere what it used to be. And the way that they edging was not through force, but through getting to know the people.
Speaking on edging into communities, Jackson, Mississippi is horrible. It's absolutely abysmal. And the crime rates in Jackson are ridiculous. I was in Jackson a couple of years ago, and I would never have went had I watched the local news and learned that about a day before I went up there, somebody had their head decapitated and their body burned and tossed on to their grandmother's porch in the area of Jackson that I was going to. I was going on a date, and I had to go pick up my date, and then we were going to go someplace else. But I would never have gone up there if I hadn't known that. And so Jackson has one of the, if not the worst crime rates in the state of Mississippi. As a matter of fact, Jackson is the only city in Mississippi that is registered as one of the top 25 most dangerous cities in America. So how do we make Jackson safe with this approach with police and social workers combinations? What approaches can we take to make Jackson be a safe city again?
Yeah. It would be easy for me to say Jackson is not our district, but I'm running to serve Mississippi, and especially the 4th district, but all of Mississippi. One is, and I think it's going to take several approaches. One that we've heard from our state governor seems to be a little more, let's get in and control the situation. And I think you've got to take a very diverse approach to it. One is to lower the poverty. That will lower crime. One is after school programs. Another one is, I think boosting mental health care in the school systems. You look at any guidance counselor, they're overburdened as it is, but you provide several opportunities One of the scary things that we're showing right now in research is that we have more definitive research to say that trauma gets passed down genetically than we do addiction. So if you had somebody that grew up in a traumatic ridden either family or environment, the likelihood they're going to be passing that down unless they get some sort of help to stabilize that. So start at the school level, start it when they're young, provide opportunities for communities to come together more. Yeah, it's going to take very diverse. It also means that some of our leaders can't just step in and step out. They need to live there and be a part of that. Otherwise,
So
it's going to
you
be seen
mentioned
like another top-down approach.
you mentioned schools, so that goes right to my next question. Do you believe that schools should be privatized or be left as is, or should they move more towards privatization?
Ooh. Ouch. Uh, so I'm a big proponent of the public school system. My wife and I made a very conscious choice with all three of our children are involved in public schools here in Hattiesburg. Even though the private schools,
Hattiesburg has some pretty good public schools, though. Unlike some other areas, Hattiesburg has some pretty good public schools.
It does. Well, it also has quite a few private schools as well that several people flock to. And so,
yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm from Hattiesburg. I went to PCS for kindergarten and first grade, and I went to Tim's Elementary for second through fifth.
So I do think one of the things is we've got to look at communities with those schools, help to bolster them. One of those is, well, at the very thing our elected officials were complaining about how much money we're getting, and yet they've never fully funded education. Every time that we propose something in the state, we proposed it first time we allowed, liquor. That money's going to go to education. Then it was the casinos. Now it's the lottery. And yet other states have presented some very interesting, good programs. But Mississippi, no, we pull from it again and again and again. We also need to provide, we need to allow schools to experiment. I have a nephew two nephews actually now that are attending in North Mississippi at a school. I don't want to out them, but I can later but they decided to take a risk. They went to the Oxford model. I mean, they went to England and said, how are you doing systems? Because their scores on all of the world metrics are through the roof. And they said, we want to give our children that opportunity. Well, when they did, the state of Mississippi then started pushing back that you're not measuring with our metrics. And so instead of awarding them for taking a chance and seeing if it works, which from what I'm seeing, it's paying off, because right now they're seeing kids score 30 plus ACTs in middle schools. So, allowing schools.
See, that's the reason why I asked that. I want to ask that question. Should it be more privatized? Because I think these teachers unions and government funded the education departments, they get so big and they get so much money, but they get so little done. And I think if the money followed the child, you find that they'd have a much better education. Because I would be hard pressed for any parent, if given the choice to send their kid to school, would send them to some place where they would do worse. If the teachers unions believe that parents are going to make such a foolish decision like that, then why are the teachers unions fighting so hard against parents being able to send their kids to better public schools in different areas than where they live? That's one of the big things with school choice. A lot of the things that's going on right now, where parents, they want to send their kids to better schools, but the teachers unions are pushing back so hard on parents for making that decision.
Yeah, that's why I lean towards let's properly fund our public schools before we send tax dollars to private schools. Um, you know, we've yet to do that. I mean, teacher salaries alone, let alone what teachers do in this state. We had a youth director a few years back at the church here whose wife was from another state, and she was amazed at all the extra duties that teachers had to do. That she says they employ several more assistants for that. Teachers never have to touch that so that they can teach. Here they're burdened with more and more and more, and then paid less than anywhere else. No wonder they're heading to out of state, and we're losing them such a rapid. And then having to come up with, I don't want to say inadequate, but definitely not fully, training the teachers the way they could be. So.
We're going to be closing up here shortly because I don't want to go beyond 9 o'clock. We might go maybe a couple minutes there, but we all have other things to do, and I could talk with you all night because we've interviewed the other guys, but you're the guy I've been waiting for, because the Democrat Party, they have a lot to say to people of color, and I want to see where Mississippi's Democrats fall in line with that. And I'm pleased to find that you are not one of the typical Democrats that are constantly screaming things about race. One of the key issues that we face here in Mississippi, and I think I'm going to close on this question, and then let Rhett do his closing, and then we'll start wrapping up. But one of the key issues, and I'm going to ask all three of these questions at once, or just in order to get it out of the way. So it's going to be relatively long. So we hear a lot of bluster about infrastructure, but seldom ever see anything get done. First, to get an idea of where you lie on infrastructure, please would you define what infrastructure is to you and explain which issues that you are most concerned about with infrastructure. And then I would like you to let us know how much money do you believe is necessary for a comprehensive infrastructure bill. And finally, do you feel that too much time is spent on infrastructure development for what the funding is? I know that's a lot, but I wanted to kind of get that out of the way so we can start wrapping up.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I would say and this is where it gets tough, because the money that's headed, this is all up to our state leaders and not necessarily our federal leaders to do that. Which is another reason why I'm running against Palazzo. I mean, he voted against the infrastructure funding, which would be okay if Mississippi were an A, a B, a C, but we have a D+ rating for all of our infrastructure. I mean, in fact, one of the few things that gets above a C was our ports. I mean, our bridges, our internet, our clean water, our roads all rate Ds. So those are kind of the ones that I would say need focus. I was talking with an environmental group just a few weeks ago, and they said here was our state elected leaders' decision. After Katrina, they sent money for water cleanup to areas they thought people would be moving to instead of where people already are. So from Katrina, 16 years later now, they're just getting the waterway to the areas that were mostly affected just now. And money has been there ever since. So I don't know if that is maybe from federal on site, of asking states, hey, you need a comprehensive plan and you've got a time frame to come up with it. Otherwise, we're sending other people down there to show you how it's done, which I know would piss a lot of people off, especially Mississippi. We don't like people telling us what to do. I mean, what person does? However, to know that our elected officials have taken this long with money that was supposed to help our water, 15 and a half years later, yeah, it's so. So yeah, as for
Yeah, you look at an example. I left Mississippi to go to Texas in 2015, came back in 2016. And when I left, before I left, should I say, they were working on a stretch of road, Highway 49 from Wiggins to Hattiesburg. When I came back in 2016, in November 2016, they were still working on that. When I went there October of 2021 to go get stuff out my storage unit in Hattiesburg, they're still working on the same stretch of road on Highway 49 between Wiggins and Hattiesburg. That's why I asked the question about time. I mean, how much time needs to go into the infrastructure development? I mean, how much money is wasted on that? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I asked how much money do you believe is necessary for a comprehensive infrastructure bill, and then how much time do you think is necessary, or if there's too much time that's been spent on these infrastructure projects. I think they should have a time frame, and they need to hit their time frame and hit their time frame within a certain budget.
I think you and I are agreeing on a lot tonight. So I definitely agree on a time frame. As for budget, I don't want to see waste, but I want to see it to where we have enough money to move us beyond the D and at least to the B level, especially among our bridges. We had a bridge here in Hattiesburg go out just last month, and so it's also 23% of our state do not have internet. And the ones that are depending upon, some of the satellite internet, it's atrocious.
Yeah, satellite internet, they're horrible.
Just after I was living in Atlanta for graduate school during the .com bust. And at that time, parts of Atlanta were like the Silicon Valley of the South. Soon after the .com bust, many of these companies then started to look around at the rest of the South and said, hey, do you have access to here or here or here? And Alabama took advantage of that way better than Mississippi did. I mean, we've got major pipelines for internet moving through Hattiesburg, but nobody, and you could have had some of our smaller communities around here, from Wiggins to Richton to you name it, take advantage to offer companies to do innovative work. But it takes getting some of that cable laid down so that we're not depending upon power lines to do it as well.
I agree. Red, any closing questions or statements that you have for Mrs. Fellers?
Okay. This will be my last one. How should the United States determine which countries deserve foreign aid and which don't?
Wow. That's a great question. And it's one that I think we need multiple experts on that field. We need to take it out of, the Democrat and Republican entirely, so that it's something that can be a bipartisan support that we can agree on, of ways to lay it forward, ways to help, but also ways to monitor. So the, one thing to maybe look at is what may be a more important question is, what kind of aid does the most good? Not only that, but then if there's countries that are doing extremely bad, what aid would do the most good, the quickest, and then which aid is something that we'd have to be in for the long haul. Not that we'd want to do this forever, but we all know some building projects take longer than others. I think it's what helped us with Katrina is after the government saw that that it didn't know what to do, they actually turned it over to some of the leadership. And I'm touting my own denomination here. The United Methodist Committee on Relief had already been doing this for decades in other countries with natural disaster. And they sat down with the leaders and then said, okay, here's your plan. We plan to be here 5, 10, 15 years down the road, because that's what it's going to take. And when, as soon as they started listening to some of that, we started having some of the development. They didn't listen to all of it because, well, you're seeing some parts that were not developed as quickly. So yeah, I do think it needs to be bringing in experts that can say what happens the quickest and what will also pay off a little bit down the road that we invest in.
All right. Yeah, that's really a great idea to bring in the church, which is already heavily involved in missions worldwide, to maybe give some counsel on how we should proceed with foreign aid.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever thought about it in that aspect. But you being a pastor, that brings a different perspective to it, and I think it does help out a lot. Oh, especially when you're going on a whole bunch of like Rhett mentioned, a whole bunch of these missions that are taking in other countries that do need aid, but then we're so focused and allocated on countries that already have GDPs that are near ours or well into the trillions, and we're still giving them financial aid and not focusing on some of these countries that need to be developed. But we thank you for coming on with us, Reverend Sellers. I would love to have you back on the show because we've had so much to talk about and there's so much still to be discussed. So I would love to have you back on the show. But before we leave here, is there anything that you would like your constituents, your viewers to know that we haven't touched on? And also let us know where we can find you if we want to donate, if we want to see where your next events are. Let us know we can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. I first want to thank you for having me. It's actually been fun. I've really enjoyed this. I'd love to come back. You can look me up both website, Twitter, Instagram, David Sellers MS. So David Sellers, Mississippi. So I'm on all three of those social, and every week I'm putting something out on Facebook and Instagram on specific issues that I'm part of, which is ending the war on drugs, education, and then finding ways to support our workers. So.
Again, thank you for coming on to the show, Mr. Sellers. After the show, once this is over with, I'm just going to take a couple of hours for this to be converted. And I'll have this file saved and Rhett will then email that to you or however he shares it with you. That way you'll be able to take this and post it to your own stuff. You can also go to my Facebook page just by typing in my name there, DeAndre Pace. You'll be able to find me and you can share the video directly to your page. So again, we thank you for coming on with us tonight, and we're going to go ahead and shut the stream down.
All right. Thank you.